Thank you. Good afternoon. It is May 8th. This is a regular meeting of the Community Resources Committee of the Town Council. And pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2025, which extends through June 30 of 2027, the ability of public bodies to meet in a remote or hybrid manner without a quorum of members in person, this meeting will be conducted via remote means. Members of the public who wish to access the meeting may do so via Zoom or by telephone. No in-person attendance of members of the public is possible, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. We have a quorum, and I'm going to go around to see if people can be heard. Councilor Haneke.
Present.
Jennifer Taub.
Yes, I'm here.
Pam Rooney is here, and we'll keep an eye out for Kathy Shane. Let's see if there are any. Interesting. I'm not able to. Oh, here we go. Here we go. There is no one in attendance. If we have people join us later, I may want to open up public comment period at that point, probably after we talk about the solar bylaw. But at this point, there is nobody in attendance. So we can move right to our action items, and that includes an update for upcoming or potential CRC work items that may come from CRC or through the planning office. So Dave and Rob Mora, I'm looking to you for some of that information. Can we let Rob in? There he is.
There's Rob.
Yeah, so
oh, go ahead. I think if Pam, maybe while I intro this, if Pam or I think I made Mandy co-host as well, but if you want to share that information. So, Rob is temporary planning director for the town, and we've had a number of conversations both with staff, but also with some of our friends in the development community, and Rob was nice enough to put together kind of a preview of kind of projects or initiatives that we're currently working on, but also, looking ahead to the months ahead and into 26 with regard to some other zoning initiatives that we are interested in pursuing. And of course, this will parallel our search also for a new planning director and economic development director combined position, but we didn't want to give the impression that, things were on hold or hiatus. And Rob wanted to outline some of those short-term kind of goals and things we'd like to bring before the council or to the council and planning board in the coming months, and then maybe a preview looking into 26.
Great. Thank you.
Does somebody have the set of slides that I sent?
Oh, did you send something to us?
I think Mandy is sharing them. Yes, this would have been the same set. I think Mandy's sharing them that was sent for the meeting on the 24th. That didn't happen. So there it is.
Yeah, there it is. Okay, thanks everyone. Rob Mora. Yeah, so I just want to talk about some of the things we're doing in the planning department that we expect, hopefully to move forward with the rest of the year. There is at least one item here that you're very familiar with, so I won't spend any time on that. But if you don't mind, we'll go right into the next slide, and I'll talk about each of the items, and then to the next slide as well. So the first item, ADUs. Planning board met again last night. They've been meeting for a couple of months on this, as we're responding to the state regulations that were presented in February. And more recently, we're starting to see some attorney general decisions come out in other communities that are helping the planning board see, how some of the final criteria might work in the bylaw that they have currently drafted. There were a couple changes made last night to strike provisions that we believe are not consistent with the regulations, and perhaps another meeting, maybe two, the planning board will be ready to deliver their recommendation to the council. In the meantime, for interest, we are getting applications. I have issued a couple ADU applications, really doing the best I can at the moment to balance, my understanding of the state regulations and what I know was, maybe the strong, feeling of the planning board on certain criteria. In fact, even delayed an application till we have, maybe some, agreement on what the final language would be. But there are applications proceeding, and we'll continue to process those until the regulations are updated. We can keep going. And we can pass right through solar. I know all of you are very much aware of what's going on with that. Oh, by the way, this discussion was also given as an update to the planning board last evening. So it's served a couple of purposes here to have this kind of put together. So going right into the next item is the BN Main Street BN extension. This some of you would not be aware of. This has come up fairly recently, and it affects just 3 properties. And the idea here to take a piece of BN that is a spot zoned location on Upper Main Street and extend it to capture a couple additional properties that are currently in the general residence district. If we go to the next slide, I'll show you the image on the mapping. The existing area here, you can see all the way to the right, there's a BVC district that runs along Dickinson Street, and this one BN parcel 319, 321 Main Street would remain unchanged, but we would propose to extend the BN district all the way over to number 229, and that's shown outlined in the next image. If we can go right to that. There it is. So 229 is an existing owner-occupied duplex. It's a nicely sized parcel. It's 20,000 square feet. It's in the RG district, so it exists there by pre-existing non-conforming status and with a special permit for a couple of accessory structures. As you know, the RG district could accommodate apartments as well for another residential use, and that can also be permitted in the BN district. The big difference is between RG and BN for residential purposes is that the additional lot area does not apply when calculating for the number of units. So that's a property that, although there's absolutely no, intention or thought at this point or conversations about anything going on for potential development, it's an owner-occupied, very nice property. There is the potential with this change for modest addition and perhaps even room for off-street parking if a future owner would ever look to take advantage of what the BN would have to offer. So moving down the street, number 257, this is the Amherst Inn. And this is really the property that is kind of focused to this conversation and driving force behind even looking at this and kind of bringing it up on the list of priorities. This property exists as an accessory use in to an owner-occupied property with a limit of 4 occupants, guests, at any time, in addition to the owner. This is a very large building. I had the opportunity to tour it a couple of weeks ago and have seen what the owners have done over the last 25, 30 years, restoring rooms and turning it into the place that it is. There are 8 guest rooms, and there's a potential for one more should the owner choose to renovate a space that is currently not occupied within the structure. But with eight guest rooms, the zoning does not allow those to be rented all at the same time. The idea here would be in the BN district the owner would have the opportunity to apply for site plan review to turn the accessory use into a principal use in, which is not permitted in the RG district, but permitted in the BN district. The owners have no interest or not looking to expand the building. They're not looking to expand or alter the site in any way. There could perhaps be some accessibility improvements needed, and we know that there will be fire safety systems that'll need to be upgraded in the building, and we're talking about that with the owner now, and they are very interested in having the opportunity to do that. So we've asked the town manager to kind of sponsor this proposal and send it to the council once we have it fully drafted, and really looking to have this support and ensure that this business remains where it is and operating as an inn. The last parcel, 285, I'll just mention there's not, there really isn't anything that would be expected to ever occur on this property. It was recently rebuilt, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, following a fire. There's been substantial renovation and rebuild of the entire structure, all new systems. There's a large parking area that can accommodate 18 or so cars, I believe. Fully maxed out on coverage, fully maxed out on building footprint. There's 6 dwelling units. There's really no opportunity to do anything with it. And since it was just rebuilt, I suspect there would never be anything changed there. So that is the basic summary of what that proposal will be. We'll continue, of course, interested in questions or comments on that at some point, but we'll continue to work on that and expect that we'll have the town manager send that proposal through the council for consideration, hopefully soon. So we can keep going.
Are there any questions from anybody on that particular topic? Mandy.
Apologize, I cannot, I have questions on ADU too, but you asked about this Main Street BN and I can't raise my hand when I'm sharing a screen.
Yeah.
I'm curious why you're choosing BN and not choosing to just extend the BVC to all 4 of those properties. BN has a larger minimum lot size requirement than BVC does. Than RG does, but it matches RG's minimum lot size of 12,000 square feet matches the BVC minimum lot size of 12,000 square feet. I haven't had time to figure out what those lot sizes are right now, but do they meet the 15,000? Do each of these meet the 15,000 BN minimum lot size? Particularly, it looks like 285 might be kind of tiny. But yeah, why BN instead of BVC?
Sure. So 285 is non-conforming by use and dimensional standards, and currently and will be into the future. The other 2 properties would have the lot area necessary for either district, BN or BVC. BVC does not permit inns by site plan review. It'd be by special permit. So that was one main reason. The BN is, a district that is not often used. There's not a lot of it around, but by definition, it's designed to be that transition from the business district to the residential district that we're surrounded by in this area. And it is designed to provide moderate density, not high density. Like some of the other districts. So having BN there, it seemed like a very good opportunity to, put it into that classification rather than BVC. We did look at that. Well, we did consider that, but thought with the transition from business with the residential right behind, a lot of owner occupied properties nearby, we thought the BN was the best, way forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a question too on if you could remind us what the zoning is to the east of Dickinson. Is that BN also, or is that BVC?
There is that's BVC right there. Yeah, where the cursor is, that's BVC. Right along Dickinson Street.
Yeah, so my question would have been similar to Counselor Hanicke's. Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions on that? Do you want to, Mandy, do you want to ask your question about ADUs, or do you want to do that at the end?
I can do that at the end.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so if we move along to the next one, we need to go right by that, fraternities and sororities. So this has come up recently in discussions, both with the university and others interested in this topic. And this has to do with what happens when a fraternity or a sorority disaffiliates with the university or the college. And this could be either by disciplinary action of the educational institution, or it could be by choice of the organization, which we understand is in fact happening across the country in locations. What we have on our current bylaw is one use classification that captures fraternities, sororities, social dormitories, or similar uses. And although the classification describes the use being somehow affiliated with the college or a college or the university, the structure of our bylaw is such that whatever the use is, it needs to be put into the use classification that it most closely relates to. So in this situation where a affiliated organization becomes unaffiliated, it actually stays in the same use classification. So for zoning purposes, it doesn't constitute a change of use. There's no review by a land use board. It just happens. And we have two cases in town of this happening, and they were asked to confirm that they are still a fraternity and not just, now a boarding house. So that's important for us to determine. But if they are, still operating under their national organization's missions and goals and performing activities as a fraternity or sorority would, they would stay in the use classification and continue to operate. So the idea here is to consider breaking the category up a little bit and building in some opportunity to have a review if this situation occurs. So the plan is to work on some language and kind of move it around between the boards and discuss it a little bit and decide if it's something we want to move forward with, and find somebody that actually wants to take it and propose it to the council.
I've got a quick question on that. If we could go back to that list, sorry. The third item was the social dormitory or similar use. As it stands today, I think we have several buildings that have been classified as that, including the one behind Hastings that was described as a social dormitory or similar use, which in most cases would be like a primarily student dorm. Should those be restricted to fraternity RF zones? It sounds like we've already stepped outside of a RF district.
I don't think we have. The social dormitory is only permitted in the RF districts, and the two most recent developments, one under construction at 47 Mather Drive and the other one on Olympia right next door. So I guess it's Olympia 1 and Olympia 2, according to the developer. Those are permitted as social dormitories in the RF district. The building you mentioned on South Pleasant Street is a mixed-use building by its principal use classification. And I'm completely aware of the conversations that occurred and the feelings about the use of the entire residential portion for for an educational institution, but it wasn't permitted as a social dormitory for a principal use. It was permitted as a mixed use building. And our mixed use building standards and by definition can include any residential use. And, that's a determination, that's a decision that the land use board made to acknowledge, I believe is how it might have been addressed in the decision amendment, that it could also include housing for the students in its entirety. And that was a decision that they made. I don't think it is a binding interpretation of anything or change in classification or use outside the RF district. But I think that's a little bit different from what we're talking about.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Yeah, for the record, I think we have to say that that mixed-use building was approved as a mixed-use building before the planning board had any awareness it was going to be used by an educational institution. And then yeah. So my personal interpretation is that they were tricked. Then the applicant came back and asked for there to be a change in the electrical boxes, and they approved that. And at that point, they learned why that request was made. But hopefully we will be savvier going forward. Just a little bit of editorializing there, but I couldn't resist. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on this one? Okay, so that'll take us to temporary uses. Some of you might remember we talked a little bit about this quite a few years ago, and even had an opportunity to sample it a little bit during COVID with some temporary zoning. And definitely, I think we had some success with it, found that it worked well. And, following up on that experience, we were the recipient of a grant that, gave us some time with the PVPC to draft a regulation, which we did do. And, it just kind of sat since. So we'd like to bring that back. We think it's important. We get a lot of requests for either seasonal or temporary activities, use of areas or properties for one day. This is private property, so it's not, public space. Either one day events or, a handful of dates that, we never have a process to actually permit it or authorize it. We advise against it in some cases. In others, we, kind of make some suggestions and say, hope for the best. And, if it gets out of hand or noisy and police are called, this is what you would expect to happen. So, we've kind of dealt with it a number of different ways, but whether it's a maze in an agricultural property, or we often had been asked to have a caterer team up with a farming institution to put together a dinner under a tent or something like that. As you know, food trucks are incredibly popular right now, and there's always requests on where they can go and what events they could be a part of. So we would like to kind of finish this one up and circulate it for consideration. And like I said, we are very close on that, and could pretty easily get that into a condition to start talking more about it.
Great. I look forward to that one. Could that include seasonal things like seasonal farm stands that otherwise have to go through a fairly elaborate permitting process otherwise?
It could, absolutely. Yep. So any type of event, activity, business use, or we can widen that scope. And just kind of, as I talked earlier, the basic structure of our bylaw is to be inclusive and find a way to permit something. And I think by having some set of criteria for good, safe and use of the property, and make sure there's some protections in place and appropriate location, I think that would give us, a better, be in a better place for considering more and more of those types of requests.
Great.
Okay,
Mandy.
oh,
Oops, Mandy.
Thanks. I absolutely support this, but can you just explain further if people ever watch this video, because I'm not sure anyone's even in the audience right now, but explain further in preparation for this potentially coming to the council to get better explanations for the council, why something like a maze built out of, you know, a cornfield. Corn is an agricultural use done on an agricultural farmland that is a yes in the bylaw, is not, would need a separate permit, like why that isn't considered part of the agricultural use of the land. Can you just explain why some of these temporary uses don't fit into the principal use of the land as a business or as an agricultural use or things like
Sure.
that? A farm
Yeah.
stand, it doesn't fit into the principal use of the land, things like that.
right, and certainly they can. So there are instances where the activity or the event that wants to, you know, happen could be connected to the use of the property, and you know, we're usually pretty lenient on that to try to make that connection. If it's somehow supporting the agricultural use in some way, we're pretty much open to it. But then, you know, no doubt there's, you know, another vendor that serves ice cream that wants to be there for those events, or, you know, there's go-karts that want to come and set up a track. And so you want to make it a destination for the family and do more than just have the maze. And when you start adding those additional operators that are not connected with the agricultural land or activity, it starts to get, you know, a little difficult to find a way to permit them when they're asking for the permission. And I think the earlier example of either a restaurant or a caterer coming, you know, and you know, whether they're leasing the space or partnering with the farm, you know, that's another one that, you know, would require not only a temporary use zoning permit, but also a temporary use food permit. So just kind of connecting all of those pieces, and what we're finding is that, you know, the more experienced vendors and operators are coming to us asking for this because it's available in other communities and we don't have it. So, you know, I think there's multiple reasons to consider it.
Thanks.
Great.
Increased additional lot area. This is otherwise known as footnote M. Some of you will remember that not too many years ago, the planning department actually was going in a different direction with this and looking to slightly reduce the additional lot area needed when building multifamily residential units. The proposal here, which was voted and approved by the planning board to send to council back in February, would propose to increase the additional lot area from 4,000 square feet per unit up to 6,000 square feet for apartments and townhouses. In their report, you'll see that they talk about how this was the original standard back in 1993. It was changed, I believe it was 2006 or 2007. It was reduced to 4,000 square feet, and the planning board is recommending that it be put back to where it was. I think there's been a lot of study done in the RG district from a few years ago from the planning department that shows the kind of the scope of potential with adding additional units with the current footnote M. So I think there's a lot of information available to see the effect that this change would have. There certainly would still be plenty of opportunity in the district. And like I said, the planning board felt strongly about this, and not unanimously, but they did vote to approve it and send it to council. And I believe that is a memo being delivered currently to the council. So it should be coming up soon.
Mandy.
This proposal is frankly quite disappointing to me. And seems to be out of touch with the state's and the town's housing crisis. There was a recent report from the Unlocking Housing Production Commission that was a state level commission regarding unlocking housing production in our Commonwealth that indicated this is a quote from the report, large minimum lot size requirements significantly hinder housing affordability, contribute to exclusionary zoning practices, and encourage sprawl, increasing automobile dependency and inefficient land consumption. By requiring excessive amounts of land per home, these regulations inflate housing costs, limit the availability of buildable land, and reduce housing diversity. And so then we get a proposal here that does exactly that, increases our lot size requirements per apartment, per home, per unit in our, what is supposedly to be the most dense part of our housing part of town. So I feel like, and I'll say this at the council, that this is going against everything our council has said about our housing goals of decreasing housing, increasing housing affordability instead of hindering it, decreasing exclusionary zoning practices, decreasing sprawl, decreasing automobile dependency, and increasing efficient land consumption is what our goals for our town manager seem to be. And this seems to go against every single one of them. So help me understand why we would make a proposal that seems to be against all of our town manager goals.
So I think it'd probably be more appropriate, since this is coming out of the housing subcommittee and the planning board, to let them respond to that question. They are presenting it. This isn't something like the others that I mentioned that staff are preparing and, recommending. And I think it'd be best to let the planning board respond to that. I know that they are intending to be there when it's delivered to the council, and the memo was just drafted and I believe forwarded to council staff to circulate.
Jennifer.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not on the planning board, but I would say that even at 6,000 square feet per house, it would still be the RG by far the densest, lead zone, the most densely zoned residential area in town. I mean, when I hear sprawl, automobile dependency, exclusionary zoning, Amherst Woods comes to mind, Amherst Hills, but not the RG districts. And I think with the pressure, I mean, there's pressures on neighborhoods where it takes neighborhoods to the breaking point. As Rob mentioned, that there's already ADU applications, and now there can be ADUs by right. In addition, there's the protected use ADUs and the ADUs that the town allows with our existing bylaw. I know there's already an ADU that's in the process of being permitted on Fearing and Lincoln Avenue. There's already a student house there, and it's going to go on that lot. Very tiny lot, really no room for infill, but that's allowed to happen. So as our year-round population is now, according to statistics that the housing subcommittee obtained from UMass, we're now down to about 13,000 non-student residents. And I think that we need to make an effort to ensure that neighborhoods where year-round residents and students are already living together on small lots, that we don't need to lose any more of our year-round residents, particularly as we're building a 63,000 square foot library. We need students to go to our schools and patrons to go to our library. So I don't see how this proposal would add sprawl, automobile dependency, or that exclusionary zoning would apply. But I can think of certainly a handful of areas in town where that description would very much apply.
Councilor Hanneke.
Yeah, I just have to correct a statement. If this proposal passes, RVC would become more dense than RG at that level of 3 townhouses.
Okay, well, that would be fine because it's RVC.
RVC is not meant to be denser than RG though. And RG and RN would basically be the same density once multiple units are built, and RN doesn't even allow multiple units. At this point in time, they don't allow apartments and all, but the additional lot area in an RN is 6,000 square feet, which is supposed to be neighborhood. And this proposal brings RG's additional lot family area to that same number. So the only difference between RN and RG in terms of density would be the initial basic minimum lot area.
Jennifer. Did you have your hand up or did you?
Oh, yeah,
mean
I'm sorry, I didn't unmute. No, but I said that the difference in that initial unit dwelling is quite substantial. It's only 12,000 in the RG and 20,000 in the RN. So that's a huge difference. And, you know, dealing with the facts on the ground, is going to be way more pressure for ADUs in the RG than certainly in some neighborhoods in the RN. And we're already, we're already seeing that. And when they, well, again, when the ADU that's already, received a certificate of appropriateness from the local historic district commission, because that was the first stop. The primary unit has 4 students, and the owner said there will be 3 students in the second. So they're not, they're not sort of even presenting that the ADUs will be for, the workforce or for families. So on that particular lot, which is very small, you can come look at it. It's on the southeast corner of Lincoln and Fearing. There will be 7 students on a tiny lot.
Let's keep going.
Thank you. So that wraps up where we were. And again, this discussion was intended to just, update everybody on what the staff is working on, committed to, and hoping to accomplish, but also invite, other ideas or council priorities, and be clear that, we're here for support whenever requested, and that we look forward to working on these items. We have a list that we were putting together for what's next, and some of this does depend on budget, final budget decisions and capital requests. But we believe East Village is our next location that we should be studying in great depth. We're going to need some outside consulting help with that, and we've asked for money in the capital plan to move ahead with that. We understand that there may be, a desire to move ahead with battery storage, standalone battery storage bylaw. The planning board has expressed interest in moving forward with further exploring their what they're calling North Amherst overlay. They haven't gotten into any, writing anything yet, but has asked staff to begin to do that. And that's, something that we'll be working on later this year. We expect that design standards to be finalized with some recommendations that we'll consider. We don't know what they are entirely yet. And then we are also expecting at least one small inclusionary zoning change that might be proposed by the either the planning board, housing subcommittee, or housing trust, maybe a combination. But in particular, they're looking at changing the formula for the payment in lieu option that had been recently used, and perhaps other changes as well as they discuss that. So that's where we are currently, and what we're looking forward to at this time. I'd also, wanted to mention that, whenever appropriate, it doesn't have to be today. We would welcome a discussion about just general process. We talked about it years ago, and when we started off working on zoning amendments following the establishment of a council. I think we saw some really, good examples of it, zoning bylaw amendments, and then we see some that are, maybe less efficient than they could be. We're all often wondering, when do we reach out to the CRC? Can we reach out to the CRC and bring you the ideas or show you things before they're referred? So we're not, maybe so much back and forth like what happened with the U Drive overlay, where we're really, doing too much development in public hearing setting. Maybe there's a different opportunity. Maybe there isn't, but we just wanted to let you know that we welcome that discussion and open to process. And, I think sharing what we're working on is perhaps the start of that.
Appreciate it, Rob. Jennifer, and then Councilor Haneke.
No, I just wanted to say, we do appreciate you bringing, items to us. Like, I would have no way of knowing that was a concern or what could be done to improve, the BN area. So, that just would never be on my radar. So I appreciate that.
Councilor Haneke. You're muted.
A couple of questions and then a comment on process. East Village, yes, let's rezone. I don't want an overlay. Let's rezone it. Let's think about a comprehensive rezoning of it to unlock housing, but also unlock commercial. And do it right for a walkable village center that makes sense in what our residents are saying they want. And our residents include not just non-college students, but college students too, but also what we're facing in terms of retail and non-retail in the current day and age. North Amherst overlay. I'm not a big fan of overlays, and I'm just going to say it. Yes, I voted for U Drive. What I would have rather preferred, though, is a complete rezone of U Drive or just a new zoning district. There are studies out there that show that every additional regulation adopted, no matter what that regulation is, whether it's a zoning regulation or a conservation regulation or just a application regulation, increases the costs to develop any type of land, and particularly housing. And an overlay versus an actual new zone is an extra regulation because there's the underlying regulation and the overlay regulation. So I'm gonna just, I'm just gonna say my preference for rezoning instead of overlays. Whether that be create a new zone, but don't have an underlying zoning and an overlay on top. Let's figure out what we want to do with that area and then create a zone that hopefully would do that. My question with my comment with process is the council form of government has been one of its goals was to ensure that staff time, particularly with zoning, is used more efficiently, that staff and the planning board and all don't spend a lot of time on things that don't have a chance of passing, because you know who your 13 votes are, and you can come to them regularly to ask, hey, are you in support of something? I think U Drive is a potential example of one where the support was there, but a lot of the development happened because there was not an outreach before it was referred to the council on what are the council's concerns with this rezoning, or the overlay, as it were. It wasn't really a rezoning. I'm not gonna blame the staff on that. I don't put blame, I don't know where the issue is, because frankly, we have to remember that the planning board voted that to go to council unanimously and then didn't really support what they sent to the council, and themselves during hearing extensively wanted modifications. So it wasn't just that the council was asking new questions or anything, but the planning board, who supported it 100% unanimously, then came back with, oh, but maybe not. So yes, we need a better process, but I think that process is maybe putting this, what's going on here, in front of either CRC or the council earlier and more frequently to understand Number one, does the council support some of what's being worked on? Do you think you can get to 9 votes on the council with what's being worked on? Or if you come to the council and only 3 people are in favor of what's being worked on, maybe that's a time to sit back, reevaluate, and say, oh, that might not be the direction we want to go because there's not looking like it's going to pass. Versus something that says, look, everyone seems to be in favor of this, but they've got these 3 concerns. Let's address that before it comes to the council for a formal hearing. So that's my comment with regard to process.
Thank you. I would perhaps, if you're looking for input on this list, if I think about the North Amherst overlay, or I think of other conversations that are happening, the definition of apartment has long been sort of a confusing one, and starts at 3 units and above. So I think addressing that dilemma, if we're trying to create a housing type that is 3 to 6 units, perhaps it is not called an apartment. That's just an idea that probably needs to get fleshed out a little bit. Mandy.
Thank you. I want to go back to my ADU questions. I haven't seen the recent draft. I've looked at prior drafts. I don't know how much has changed since those prior drafts, but I was in a webinar with the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, and it might have been my Mass Housing Partnership, but it might have been the Middlesex thing, a Middlesex Council Planning Commission, where they were explaining the draft standard exemplar of a bylaw for the ADU to implement the ADU regulations at the state. And one thing that was made clear to me in that webinar was that there's a protected use ADU is a by right use, whether or not there's a non-protected use ADU on the lot. Meaning that if there's already an ADU on the lot that is defined outside of the protected use ADU, you have to allow a protected use ADU on that lot. And I recognize that might be a controversial opinion, but especially in a town that has already limited ADUs to 1 per lot, and might try to continue to do so, but we already have a number of ADUs. They indicated, though, at this webinar that the towns could potentially choose to define a protected use ADU wider and more inclusive than the state definition is. Particularly with respect to size. Our size definition of any ADU that we have right now in our bylaw is 1,000. The protected use ADU under state law and regulation is 900 square feet. I'm using that one as an example. And that then, if that definition is slightly more comprehensive, that the currently built ADUs would fall under protected use and therefore would not then trigger another protected use ADU as of right. So what I took from that webinar was that they were what I interpreted as the EOHLC, as well as the model bylaw group, were essentially encouraging towns to define their protected use ADU as close to the current town's ADU definition as possible in order to encompass as many currently built ADUs as possible. And so my question, this is a long-winded way of asking, does the current bylaw intend to do that?
It does not. And, you know, we will have at least one more opportunity to discuss that with the planning board, and we can try to frame it in the way you just did. Right now, the current draft has the protected ADU. I guess I would describe it as close to the state requirements as possible and not much more. And there is the draft includes a local ADU that provides a second path to create a larger unit that comes with criteria that would not be available for the protected ADU. So that's their approach right now. 900 square feet for protected, as the state has defined it, 1,200 square feet in a local ADU with a bunch of criteria that they can't apply in the other situation. And that's what they're going to be discussing at their next meeting and coming to a decision on hopefully soon.
Jennifer.
Is the planning board, because what Counselor Haneke just described, she learned because she's, a representative to a statewide entity, if I'm understanding correctly. So is the planning board aware of that interpretation? So it
They are.
sounds like our current ADU bylaw allows up to 1,000 square feet. So if the protected use in Amherst, if we made that 1,000 square feet, I mean, I'm just wondering if the planning board's even aware of this.
I believe they are, because we've discussed this very early on, and that was my interpretation before all this even came out. And I think we even permitted one so far. And I think it might even be, more complicated, when an owner of one of those priorly permitted ADUs, even though it may, fit the criteria for a protected ADU, what happens if they choose to keep the owner occupancy deed restriction on record and enforce it? Can they elect to do that and say, that's my non-protected ADU. I still want a protected ADU. So, and I've asked town attorney for some guidance on a couple of these things and haven't gotten all the answers I need, but these are the types of decisions that are coming to me every day. So it's more than just a square footage measurement, and it's the way we measure it. The 900 square feet in the in the state regulation is calculated differently than the way we measure the 1,000 square feet and have measured the 1,000 square feet historically. So to get all of those pieces to align is going to be some amazing effort, come through, but we'll keep working on it.
So I just have to say, I think even people that are concerned about now that you can have the protected use ADU and the ADU that the town allows, even if there's a concern, I think my sense is everyone knows that's what the law is. Like there isn't really room to contest that the law is clear that the protected use ADU is allowed even if there is an existing ADU.
I
So,
believe that's been very clear.
right, it has been, and I think
it-
people accept that. That's just the law. So, yeah.
And
So I mean,
one final, go ahead, sorry.
No, I'm done. That's it.
And I wonder if it's possible to have a calculation factor that allows us to compare apples and oranges with the square footage, so that we know what our 1,000 square foot actually comprises of.
Yeah, we certainly can go through those exercises. I think in the state regulation, what complicates it for me is the way they include non-uninhabitable spaces
Right.
in baseline calculation, which of course we never did,
Right.
and creates a really interesting example with both creating units that are larger than 900 square feet as a result, and having units that are equal in size, when finished, which, it just isn't what we intended would ever happen. But we're trying to work through that. We've actually, in our current draft, we are suggesting that we calculate similar to the way we currently do, using habitable space as the defining measure of the gross square footage. We did send that question to the AG's office, haven't gotten a response yet, and we're just kind of watching what is happening in other places, and maybe we'll get a response to that before this is ultimately voted on.
Yeah. Jennifer.
I have a question. It's so in terms of that's habitable space versus, I guess, square footage. So in terms of occupancy, because you're the protected use ADU, you can't set an occupancy limit beyond what the state allows occupancy per square foot. And the state says you need 125 square feet for the first occupant and 100 for each additional. So in a 900 square foot protected use ADU, you could legally have 8 occupants. But if we determine occupancy versus we consider square footage by how much is inhabitable, but the state does it just total square. I'm just wondering if there's any difference in terms of how we would get to the number of occupants in 900 square feet. Would that be different than how the state would get to that? I don't know if I'm making it clear.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, in my opinion, as this comes back to for unrelated, I don't think it's going to be enforceable in an ADU. And we're going to be relying on those square footage minimums that are in state sanitary code that you just referenced. It doesn't work out exactly the way you described it, because a kitchen has to have a minimum amount of square footage, a bathroom has to have a minimum amount of square footage, and when you start kind of breaking down the pieces, whatever square footage is less then gets applied to your formula if privacy is provided between tenants and so on. So there's a physical aspect to the layout of the space to make it work. So it isn't just simply kind of crunching the number that way. But it certainly could create a space that can accommodate more than 4 occupants with a 900 square foot ADU.
But good to know they couldn't have 8. Not that they would, but that's not. So,
Right.
So it has to do with bedroom sizes, not just raw square footage.
It's sleeping area,
Okay.
which is typically in bedrooms, but it could be in one large open space as well. But then you get into privacy between tenants, and it really depends on the group of people living there on how that could work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Okay. Yep. That's
This
all I
has
had.
been
So thank you.
very, very helpful, and it gives us a good sense of what's coming down the pike.
Okay. Thanks for your time.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Still looking to see if Kathy Shane will join us. I don't believe it. I texted her and she said, I wish I could join probably by 4 if that still works, which is soon. I'm going to get back. I'll see what time the meeting starts and ends by. So she's otherwise occupied. Our next item is solar bylaw, and I noticed there was one person in the audience earlier who missed our public hearing by minutes, but that person has left. So again, there are no attendees at this time. Jennifer.
I'm sorry, I know we're getting to solar bylaw, but we have a half hour. I just wanted to make sure we would have some time to discuss, ZBA and planning board.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think if we're lucky, we'll get through the hazmat section that Mandy and Pat worked on, and hopefully a little beyond that. But I want to save at least 15 minutes at the end for talking about ZBA and planning board. Thank you, Stephanie, for joining us. Sorry to keep you on the hook for that long. So where we last left off, we had a conversation on hazardous materials, which were sort of scattered throughout the text, and we had a proposed hazardous materials section itself without a number. And I wonder, Mandy, Councillor Haneke, if you could give us just a quick overview of what you and Pat, the approach that you took to pulling that together.
Sure. I'm going to there were some added definitions that I can talk about later of how we got to those definitions. But let me page down to wherever hazmat is. We're getting there. There we go. Yeah, the approach. Basically, Pat and I had a conversation. She asked what I was concerned with. And we worked out our concerns and worked through some language that would sort of address those concerns and hopefully be a little more clear as to what's going on. You know, she explained what she was trying to do, and I explained where my concerns regarding the language were, not necessarily with what the goal was. We did talk about certain paragraphs here to try and really figure out what the goal of that section was, in terms of what it's trying to prevent or regulate and what type of thing it was trying to prevent or regulate or you know, concern it was going after. And then we basically tried to clean up the section to do that, accomplish those goals in a manner that was cleaner, clearer, and more consistent with the use of language and terms, hence a lot of new definitions in the definitional section and some questions regarding some other definitions that have been added as we've talked about protection of water supplies and hazardous waste and all. So we made a clear distinction between a hazardous material and a hazardous waste. Those were in some sense trying to be used interchangeably, and they are two different things. You know, materials are not necessarily hazardous waste. And we can go back up to the definitions to make that clear. But and so you'll sort of see we start with hazardous waste issues, and then we move to sort of hazardous materials. And this is, some of this needs reordered, but we wanted to show the changes without the reordering. And once you start reordering, you lose sort of the track changes of what you were doing to the original. So there's, think about hazardous waste, think about hazardous materials. Materials is sort of what's on site and being used or stored. And hazardous waste is when you're done with something, what happens to it. Is a simple definition. When we go up to the definitions, it is. So, yeah.
How about we start with the definitions then, because that will establish our understanding of the conversation.
Sure. So, discharge is the same thing as hazardous waste being discharged. It's not a hazardous materials. And so this is when something that is, oh, this is supposed to be an of here. Sorry, not an or. This is when hazardous waste is actually put onto or into land, surface water, groundwater, atmosphere. This is not simply the secure storage of something. This is when it's actually moved out of its secure storage onto or into the environment almost. That's what the discharge is. And disposal is not just the discharge side of that. That can be, disposal is trying to get rid of it in, you know, in a secure manner almost, but the purposeful discharge can be accidental or intentional. Disposal is sort of when you're done with using a hazardous material in a sense and it becomes waste. What do you do with it? What's your plan to get rid of it at that point? So we had a definition of drinking water supply.
Which it looks like you added.
Yes, so another one that we added, so discharge and disposal and drinking water supply all came from something Pat already had regarding, I don't know, from a different bylaw and a different section, but federal sort of definitions. And this place, we added a drinking water supply because we were talking about it in the hazardous waste section, that talked about sort of anywhere. And we had a question about this. We obviously didn't do anything. Is it possible to use this definition, which is slightly more broad than the surface water supply protection area definition? When we're talking about the surface water supply protection, we did not change anything related to that. We did add sort of this drinking water supply reference to some of the surface water supply protection area. But you'll see that drinking water supply is ground or surface water in use or which may reasonably be used, but for public or private drinking water supply. So it brings it all in and is slightly more comprehensive than the surface water supply protection area definition. Hazardous materials is a definition that in a sense is cobbled from a couple of different things. It is not, hazardous waste was also pulled from the materials Pat had that she was discussing and had originally written, but hazardous materials was not in there, but we felt we needed a definition that brought in what is a hazardous material versus hazardous waste. And this definition I pulled from OSHA definitions of hazardous materials, and then added, there was a section in there that was added from, OSHA was a little less comprehensive, and then I forget which government agency it was, that added more of the plant animal part, and into the environment section, and all. So I made it a little more comprehensive than the OSHA definition is, but it did come from a standard sort of definition. We didn't just think of this on our own. Hazardous waste again. And so materials is sort of like, as it sees, any substance that has the potential to cause harm if released. And hazardous waste is slightly different in it. So hazardous materials is, I think, a little bit more comprehensive because hazardous waste is waste side. It's not just the material itself. So yeah, those are the definitions we suggested adding. Given those definitions, we then go down to page 11, I think.
So just a moment on the hazardous materials. So in some of the bullets under the old, well, in our section 17.10, which was our protection of drinking water supplies, there were several bullets that have to do with hazardous something, right? And one of them was, I'm not seeing it right here, but I highlighted, it was like fertilizers. There's Kathy Shane. Kathy Shane joined us at 4:09. Thank you, Kathy.
Here.
That included pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers not used appropriately. And so I don't know if that's the kind of thing that could be incorporated into your list. So it's just inappropriate use of such materials.
So hazardous materials is more of, is the material, does the material have a potential to cause harm? And so fertilizers do have a potential to cause harm, right? Those would be toxic agents, damage to various things, right? Some of them are flammable, oxidize, water reactive, and all. And that's, if you look at this definition, so we tried to make sure it included everything that was in prior lists down below and all. And this definition talks about this agent and the substance has it, whether or not it's stored properly, right? Just the existence of the material is potentially hazardous, right? Whereas hazardous waste, if you look at it, is the waste that can be hazardous when improperly treated, stored, transported, used, or disposed of, or otherwise managed. So the waste is sort of is a little bit slimmer of its definition than the material. So if we want to think of it that way, the material is a broader definition and contains more things than a waste does. But we tried to make materials ensure that it included everything, as I get down to that section, everything that that section had already sort of delineated and listed out. The goal
Yep.
was to make sure it includes it all.
Good. Good.
So if we go down to that.
So now we're talking about the hazardous waste section
Section.
itself. Yep.
Yeah,
And
so,
can you enlarge this as much as possible? I have it up on my screen. Yeah, that's much better. Thank you.
okay, so the first section was just reworded, no hazardous waste shall be discharged on the site, and we talked about what was the point of that, and we got a little, so this is one, it's not referencing the site. Well, we have questions as to whether you need to reference the site, but we talked about what is discharge. So we rewrote it to discharge, disposal, or treatment of hazardous waste is prohibited, except as otherwise provided in the section. And there's some talk about because disposal requires transport generally, and things like that. But we tried to be a little more clear than just no hazardous waste shall be discharged on the site. Discharged is slightly different than this disposed of. And so we just wanted to make sure things were a little clearer. There was a question as to whether you need the phrase upon or within any land or water on the site or within the surface water supply protection area. Just sort of a semantic question as to whether without that, does that phrase add anything or actually contract from the other one? Does it go one way or the other? If you get rid of it, is the statement broader? And do we want it broader? If you keep it, is it broader or not? So it was just a question. So we left it in for now, but left that comment of, do we need that phrase? Do we want that phrase?
And the surface water supply protection area maybe, and maybe Stephanie can address this, it may be a specific line on the earth. But in our subsequent sections, we talk about no disturbance zones of 400 feet or 200 feet or 100 feet. Is that what we're talking about? Are we actually talking about anything out within an exclusion zone?
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Are you asking me, Pam?
Yeah, if you had any thought on that.
Well, my reaction to that would be that if you're applying these, then they would apply to those areas that are defined as no disturbance or the regulated area. So a defined regulated distance is what I would say that would apply to. That would be my understanding.
So if we were 500 feet from a well and there was 400 feet of no disturbed area, then in fact you'd be okay in that situation because it would be outside of that regulated distance.
That would be my interpretation.
Okay,
That if
yeah.
it's outside a regulated defined area,
Yeah.
then outside of jurisdiction.
Great, thank you. Kathy?
I'm waiting till that conversation is done, and I have one comment on the sentence that starts emergency response procedures following. My suggestion would to following an accidental discharge of hazardous waste, because up above we say you can't discharge it, so this would be an accidental. So it's just the adjective accidental. So I think it's fine to remove spill of oil, hazardous cleansers. So that those all imply you didn't intend on doing it. So, because otherwise we've set up above, it's prohibited unless we provide for it. And we're not providing for it. We're just saying you've got to have a response to it if it happens. So accidental may not be the best word, but I'm trying to reconcile it that you can't do it with.
Mm.
Yeah.
Thank you. Counselor Haneke.
So I can respond to that if we want to jump to that one. So discharge of hazardous waste is accidental or intentional. It could be both under the definition, I believe. If I don't want to scroll because you see my scrolling. But discharge of hazardous waste is a defined term. And we wrote it this way because there is an except otherwise provided in this section. So discharge of hazardous waste. So what we wanted here was an assurance that there's a possibility, hazardous waste discharge, I believe can include, this is where I should, pardon me as I scroll back up to the definitions. Is accidental or intentional spilling, leaking, pumping, pouring, all of that, or dumping on into or any land. Pouring, emitting, and so, yeah, we don't want any of that done,
I'm not,
right? Oh, wait,
I'm not insistent on this word, Mandy. I just thought we
Yeah.
we don't
No,
want.
so it includes both, and we took a discharge of hazardous waste needing, no matter whether it was accidental or intentional, because it can be intentional and still be prohibited, right? You can prohibit the discharge and someone can still do it intentionally, because it can be expensive to dispose of hazardous waste, right?
I withdraw my suggestion.
Yeah, we wanted to make sure it included it all, and that there were response procedures for all of it.
So I actually have a comment on that same paragraph, in that I would personally want, and I want to make sure that we have in our submittal requirements, is an emergency response procedure established in collaboration with the town, with the fire chief, in place before something happened. And so the word following a spill set me in the mindset that you mean we only do this after the fact. I would rather have it a submittal requirement to begin with, and that you have something in hand when something accidentally happens. Does that make sense? That this might go to section 1704, and we may already have that requirement, but I want to make double sure.
Yeah, so the intention was the following a discharge was not you create the procedures after discharge, but that those are created in case there is a discharge. So exactly what you're talking about was the intention of this, not because you have to have something in place. So there could potentially be some rewording here of if hazardous materials are stored on site, emergency, we might be able to reword it regarding hazardous materials, emergency response procedures, figure out some wording, but reference hazardous materials on site, that if you're going to store them on site, store or use, or there's other words, stored, used, that you have to submit an emergency response procedure that is developed in collaboration with the fire chief. Although we had a question about this of, is it developed in collaboration with the fire chief, or should it be approved by the fire chief? Who should approve it? And is there a need to approve it versus just develop it in collaboration with, was another question we had.
I'm going to take a quick break here. We said we would stop at quarter after, that we've hardly touched the subject, so I really apologize. We are trying to do too many things at once. This was really good work. It looks pretty darn good. I want to switch gears so that we can address upcoming ZBA appointments and discussion. If we could hold on this, I appreciate everyone's time, including Counselor Haneke's and Stephanie's. But we really need to do a check-in on what's coming next month. Jennifer, you put together a list of the number of active CAFs that we have in hand for both
And
the planning board.
I just have a,
Kathy-
Pam,
Yeah.
I'm fine. As you know, I missed an hour of this and it's because it somehow never got on my calendar, but that's okay.
Ooh,
No,
ooh.
no, that's my fault because it got deleted when the time changed but can you make sure, Mandy, that you give us this version in Word in some way? I guess
It's in our,
you normally put them in SharePoint.
It
It
is
is in SharePoint.
and it is version 13A in SharePoint, except what I typed in today.
Okay, so I just want to, I said before I would try to catch up, but it's watching the side comments and then things you've already discussed seem to be you're returning to discuss them again. So I'm trying to understand where there was any people weren't agreeing or it was an unfinished discussion. So I will print it and mark it up myself just on this. But I'm finding right from the get-go, I'm finding this very difficult because the document's impossible to read. And I can't just accept changes the way I normally would. So I'm going to try to read it with a knowledge that and as my understanding is, as we've gone through and said yes to something, we've accepted the change. So, but there were little red marks here of Pam Rooney added some things. So that needs to get.
We have to go back to that. We need to go back to that. So
Anyway,
Good.
my request is I will just red mark them. Did we already address what you said? Because it's confusing for me as a reader coming in, not having heard the discussion several months ago.
So if I may, Kathy, yeah, there are some of the comments say start here at next meeting. Generally, that comment will tell you what we've been through except for the red marks, and comments above those parts are sort of unfinished discussions almost, or we had to go back and stuff. So you can use some of those comments that are marked start here, from this start here, from this start here, that sort of show what we've been through. I've been trying to delete comments as we get through stuff. So
Yeah.
many of the comments in the first
Okay.
sort of
Is
part
that-
of the
is that-
section.
And the place for me to look is SharePoint, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
yes, yes.
Okay.
And I made a mistake on the agenda because I referenced version 13. I should have referenced 13A. But that is the only one, that is the one in the packet.
It's okay, because I can look at the date that something was, and when Mandy puts this in, it will have today's date.
Right, right. So I apologize, just given the timing on this, that I didn't think the
It's
first
okay.
section was
As
gonna
I
be an
said,
hour long.
that's my only request to try to, and I will get this back on the schedule, my schedule.
Okay, okay. Sorry, so tangent, Jennifer, can you bring us up to date on the number of CAFs that we have in hand?
Yes, so we have 4 CAFs for the ZBA and for the planning board in hand. So for the ZBA, we have vacancies pending for 2 full-time positions, and then there's always 4 associates, which are just year-long positions. So every associate position is opened every year. And then on the planning board, we have 3 vacancies and we have 4 CAFs received. I reached out to everyone to whom we had received a CAF for either or both the planning board and the ZBA in the last 2 years, and a number of those people, a couple responded that they were not going to be pursuing, and then others I just didn't hear from. But so there's 4 CAFs received for both. In SharePoint, you can see who those individuals are. We don't make them public at this point. That's correct, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you can see. So, and one reason I was thinking, well, we need to discuss this, but I am hoping, and I don't know if you would agree, but my suggestion would be, because I remember in past years, it is so difficult when you send out the doodle calendar request and you're trying to have, 12 to 14 people find a mutually convenient date, that if the applicants are available during our regularly scheduled meetings, the CRC meetings in June, that would be June 12th and June 26th. If we picked one for planning board and one for ZBA, and the applicants could join us then, that would save a lot of scheduling headaches. So I guess part of what I would like, if it was possible at this meeting or certainly the next, but I'd prefer it now if I could reach out to those who have submitted CAVs and just ask if they could pencil in dates for the interviews. Even
Any
if we're
thoughts
not declaring the pool sufficient.
Any thoughts on that? Any issues with choosing those 2 dates as the primary interview periods?
Can you repeat?
Yeah, we have CRC meets on June 12th and June 26th. And if we did ZBA interviews at one, planning board at the other, we could have our recommendations for the council. The council could act on our recommendations at the meeting on June 30th. And then we would actually make the July 1, our target to have the vacancies filled. Because the terms of the current members whose terms are coming up for renewal end on June 30th. Now, we've had it happen before where we need to ask those whose terms have ended if they would just participate at the next planning or ZBA meeting or two, but our goal would be to have the new members appointed by July 1st.
Yeah, Councilor Haneke.
So that would give us, if I'm looking at a calendar, a June 12th interview would require everything be posted by June 5th, which is exactly 4 weeks from today. Which means statements of interest have to be in before that, and we need to vote pools sufficient either today or May 22nd for whatever interviews would be happening on the 12th.
Yeah. Or
Um,
we would just agree that we'll be going into July if we can't make. Or I see
I-
what you're saying. No, we could have the interviews at another.
If I could clarify though, we would need to have statements of interest by, call it the 2nd or 3rd of June for one interview round, and then by the 16th or 17th for the second batch, whichever comes first, planning board or ZBA, right?
Yeah, maybe a little earlier, given potential need for whoever's reviewing those statements of interest to ensure that they comply with our guidelines in terms of length and stuff, and to get the entire packet to staff to post, because you cannot. It's polite to give staff more than 2 hours to post stuff before a meeting when it needs done. For a day or two,
So it would need to be posted by June 3rd for an interview on June 12th?
June 5th. I believe it's 7 days in advance.
7 days, okay. So if we
June
got
5th.
to
So we could-
staff by June 3rd.
So we could have statements of interest due June 2nd and June 16th, for instance.
Depending
would-
on whoever's compiling its schedule,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I would make it.
But if
make-
we got it in this June 2nd for the June 12th meeting, that would give who's ever posting it 2 or 3 days to do it.
Yeah, and it's just depending on, does the person who's compiling it to get to staff have
Yeah.
time to compile it between whenever you set the deadline and when it needs emailed to staff?
Yeah.
Um,
It would happen.
I should also add that one of the candidates, so it's not, we actually have 7 candidates for 8 positions because one candidate checked off ZBA and planning board.
for 9 positions.
Including the associates,
2
yes.
full in ZBA and 3 planning board. I mean, 4 applicants for 3 positions, we've never declared. a
I know, I
successful,
know. Yeah.
Ever.
No,
4 candidates for 6 positions,
Right.
we've never really declared a sufficient pool.
I was sort of thinking,
And partially because, you know, we've tried in the past to say, well, but then we'll potentially only fill the fulls, and all, but then it frankly gets awkward when there are other potential vacancies there, and you're gonna say, actually, we're not gonna make recommendations on those vacancies and make you go through the process again. You know, it just gets awkward. So I would be hesitant to even say something like, oh, but we'll only be filling the fulls at ZBA so we can declare the pool sufficient, even though that meets our bare minimum of twice the number of candidates for openings, because we've hit some awkward situations when that's been the case. In terms of I'm talking there about the ZBA in particular because of that associate situation. I hate this part, personally. Our candidate pools have gotten smaller and smaller over my 7 years on the council. And that to me is a real problem. Just in general, ignore all of the disputes we've had as 3 counselors. Kathy's never been in this situation before, but the 3 of us have been here now 4 cycles of this, in terms of just who. The fact that no one really wants to be on these committees makes me wonder why. And I don't know whether this town manager has similar issues recruiting and getting candidates for other committees or not, or whether this is simply a result of the public process that we make candidates go through. Yet we can't leave these positions.
No, it's our responsibility to get these boards.
They're
up and running.
regulatory boards. It's a problem if there's vacancies.
Jennifer, and then we'll come back. Yeah. All of the
So
above.
when I do outreach, which I do, you know, I kind of stop people on the street. I don't, but I haven't heard anyone respond about the process. I think it's just, they'll usually say it's just they don't have the time. I mean, some people I think just don't feel that they're, you know, have the expertise, particularly for planning board and ZBA. And I'm sure that's true for finance as well, but it's more that feeling like they may not have the skills, and then it's just such a time commitment. But yeah, it is concerning.
Could I ask Dave if he knows whether the manager has similar issues with candidate pools in terms of numbers, just in general with the town side of this, of board things?
Yeah, I think Angela may be a better source of information than I am on this, but I think listening to your conversation, I think in general, I think a lot of it does have to do with the time commitment and historically kind of the intensity of whether it's ZBA or planning board and the amount of time it takes, you know, both in the meetings, but also prep time, et cetera. So yeah, overall though, I would say we're challenged recruiting across the board. So it's not, you know, so unique to planning board or ZBA, but you know, it's just a challenge. People's busy lives, professionally and personally, and it's hard to commit.
I guess I would have the same question pre-council. Was this also an experience with ZBA and planning? I mean, I think these are both difficult boards to be on if you anticipate there's a lot of activity. They're easy to be on if no one is proposing zoning changes and no one wants to build anything. So we had a period of time where there weren't any big buildings being proposed. But as soon as there's activity, so Pam, you know from the
Yeah, I
past.
have an answer. I have an answer to that. Pre-council, if someone submitted a CAF and expressed interest in being on a particular board, there was, in fact, well, this is going back a while, there was hardly an interview process. And it was really the reflection of, you know, somebody's qualifications or background that prompted their appointment. I never had an interview. I was recommended.
So I was asking less about process and more that if there were 2 vacancies, did you get 6 people wanting to be on it? And then
Oh,
someone.
I don't know. I see.
You know,
You never knew
see-
how many
see, we
people
never- we
had
never-
actually put their name in.
Oh, you never
Yeah.
knew.
Yeah.
Okay.
Councilor
So-
Haneke, and we still don't.
So when the council first started appointing, which was a couple months into our terms, we had, for the first set of appointments, we had to do the whole boards again because the ZBA went up from 3 to 5 members and the planning board went down from 9 to 7. And so there was a whole redo, but I simply remember that one of the reasons we have this, you have to redo the CAFs and you have to sort of apply and all is because in some of the first sets of appointments we were doing, I was communicating with upwards of 20 or 30 people. In terms of interest that had been expressed over the prior 3 years of CAFs, which we don't have those numbers of CAFs anymore. There's been discussion as to why that might be. Since the council has been in place, the CAF system has been split in half. There is a CAF for everything but council appointments, and there is a CAF for council appointments. And there has been some speculation as to whether that split has reduced the number of people expressing interest in planning board and ZBA because, there's the other things on our CAF are the charter review, the redistricting, there's a couple of other things on it, but we don't ever get someone that's like, oh, I want to volunteer and then starts checking things off because that big one is the one that the manager gets and doesn't have ZBA and planning board on it. And so that might be speculatively potentially contributing to the smaller pools that we see, because you don't get someone that's just wants to volunteer. They find the manager ones and our 2 committees aren't on that list.
No, I think that's just based on a sort of a brief conversation I had down at Amherst Coffee. Someone said, I saw the list of committees thinking, which would I want to go on? And I said, but you don't even have the whole list because there's the finance. I was trying to recruit this person to be on finance. And I had a longer conversation about that, would have been perfect, and said no. But I realized that those 3 and what the public document, the public was seeing, and it was going out in people's newsletters and everything, didn't include those. And so, that's, I think speculating about that is correct because the bandwidth for checking multiple places for I want to volunteer, where should I look, is probably pretty narrow. Looking in one place would be a good thing, even if it branched off in a different direction. Computer-wise, it would be easy to trigger. This one goes over here, and it could be invisible to the person checking the boxes. So that's an interesting speculation because at least my experience, I said, planning and ZBA, and then someone else was conservation. But, on what the person's background was, they would have been good for several. So I'll just, I'm just seconding that it may not be as easy to find, even if Jennifer's talking to everyone she knows, it may not be as easy to find as going down a list and checking every box of something I might be interested in. Yeah.
So all that said, we still may want to make a decision on the sufficiency of a pool. And I'm thinking, I'm just looking at these numbers directly, if there are 4 CAFs and 3 planning board vacancies, if the 3 vacancies are filled, one person doesn't get it, one person may then be interested or acknowledge that they might also be interested in the ZBA. That would give us 5 people to talk about for the ZBA.
But
Um,
Jennifer said, no, Jennifer said one of these is applying for both. So we don't,
Oh, yeah, that's right.
we
Yeah,
we
that's
don't
right.
have, we don't have 8 here. We have 7.
That's right. That's
We
right.
have 7.
So 2 things. One is I would be happy to reach out to again, and Jennifer's done a really good job of, are you interested? Will you send in a new CAF? Are you interested? But you're going to be away for a little bit. So if we were to follow up at all, it's going to fall on me to do that.
I can still
but-
do, I can do emails, no problem.
Okay. And maybe just those people that haven't responded yet, but whose CAF is sitting there 2 years old.
But no, they've been reached out. They've been
Yeah,
contacted.
they have, yeah, and they haven't replied
I
yet.
mean, maybe 2 or 3 people responded that they weren't going to be submitting, and they gave the reason. One person's now on ECAC. But the others I just haven't heard from, and I wouldn't want to bother them again.
Yeah. Jennifer, Counselor Haneke.
So I'm trying to remember if the press release for the town manager's ones included planning board and ZBA, and if it didn't, can we reach out to the manager to ask if our communications director, communications officer, can create essentially the same press release, but instead say the town council, instead of change town manager to town council, change all those openings to just planning board, ZBA, add finance in there. Finance might be just as bad at this point, I don't know. And resubmit that, put it on the webpage, send it out to the general press release group. Have we done that? And if not, can we do that before we vote this at all?
So short answer is Pam did that because she saw that really nice press release from Samantha, and she wrote back and said, hey, would it be possible to do this for the following? I got my wrist slapped because I did not ask permission from the town manager to do that, and that it was going to take staff time, so that if anything happens, then I need to craft the message. Then I can send it to Paul Bockelman and ask him to ask Sam to kindly post the message. So the short answer is yes. Pam hasn't done it, but I tried that and got my wrist slapped. Jennifer.
Can we ask Dave if he can?
I was gonna say, Pam, why don't you and I work on that? If you craft a message, send it my way, and I will work with Sam, who sits 20 feet away from me.
Okay.
And
I
then-
actually threw away the one that I had been keeping for reference, so I'll have to.
Well,
Can we
sure.
just look at the ones that the town manager sends and just
It's kind of
substitute?
easy. The town manager one changed the words and we've
Yeah.
got,
Yeah,
Yeah, and
we
Right.
either have 2 or we
was
have
my-
3, depending on what GOL says finance is, if they don't have enough for
And
finance.
Yeah.
fix the link so it goes to the right calf.
yeah, and send that my way, Pam, and I'll
Okay.
work on it.
I will do that.
So
Thank
I have
you.
just a question. If there are 4 for ZBA and they're 2 full-time, do these 2 need to be tied together, or could you go ahead and do the ZBA and wait to try to get more for planning? Or is there a strong preference for doing them together? It's a question, not a preference.
So there are 6 for ZBA, 2 full and 4 associate.
Have we ever had the full complement of people?
The very
We lost you
first
last week.
council, Pam, there were, people said, we don't normally fill all the associates, but this time we have so many people, we're putting everyone on. It was when Evan was, I'm just remembering the very first round, we filled lots of slots, thinking some of them would be there long enough to, and a few who were there went on another board, went off, didn't stay on ZBA, but they did get an appetite for serving.
I think the current fiscal year is the first fiscal year since the council started that all of the associate positions have not been full. We've been, at least at some point during the year, certainly the council has ended up in a situation where an associate has resigned. And it did not reopen the position before the new, because there were still 3 others, and we got assurances that it was doing fine, that the board was operating fine with those 3. But for many years, we've been able to fill all 6 slots.
We've also had a situation this year where on both boards, there's been some members that have left during the year. And again, and in each case, they cited the time commitment. So I guess maybe we have to be a little clear on what the time commitment is.
My other question is, are any of the people, I assume either some or all of the people who are going off have already served 2 3-year terms. Are there times when we would consider another term if there was interest in staying on? And I know you would normally, if we have enough applicants, we would normally not be suggesting to someone, are you willing? And I know the one of the town manager's regular appointments, he's kept someone on because of the expertise, and it's on human resources, that the person's been there, an employee benefits advisor, but it's an internal advisory. So have we ever done that? Would we ever consider that? Or is it better just to stick with 6 years and you're not asked whether you might be interested in staying on? That's my question.
I think it depends.
Yeah, I
The-
believe the
Of
current, go on.
go ahead.
No, go. I mean, is the current planning board chair, I think he might be on his 3rd term. No, I don't think we've ever said somebody can't, but what
He
we
had a
have,
short,
He had
This
a short
time-
first one, so
Right,
he
right.
he might be end up over 6 years at the end of his term, but he was an interim
Yeah,
appointment for.
I know there've been instances of that where they weren't for a full 3 years, they for whatever the reasons were,
we had 2 people, at least one or 2 people this time who could have served again, but said that they can't for other commitments. So what I'm saying is there's people on that haven't timed out, but they've taken themselves out of the running.
okay,
well-
so we need to wrap up this conversation. So our next meeting is the 22nd. Maybe we have a little bit different feedback by then. And maybe by the 22nd, we could hopefully declare a sufficient pool, I'm hoping. And that would give us roughly a week plus to announce the requirement of a statement of interest. So that gives us, again, it gives us a little bit of time. So we won't make the decision today because we don't feel comfortable that we have a sufficient pool, but we'll try to refocus on the 22nd. Jennifer, are you going to be able to be at that meeting on the 22nd?
Yes, I should be able to, but even
Okay.
if I couldn't, I could still. So this is what, I have 2 questions. So then I should not alert anybody who submitted a CAF to put anything on their calendar. I mean, I was just hoping, even if we have to change it, I just don't want to ask people a week to 2 before to schedule something that seems like it's pushing it.
I think it's logical to say, we're trying to put the interviews on this date, please keep it open.
Yeah.
But we're not guaranteeing they'll happen, but ask
And do
them
we
to keep
want
it
to right now target one for ZBA and one, like, if we're looking at June 12th and June 26th.
I personally would feel better if you asked them to keep both open.
Yeah,
Just
I
ask
was
them to
gonna
keep
say the
both.
same.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
For
Yeah,
both boards.
That works too. Okay, thank you. I'll
Yeah.
do that.
okay. And then we'll get a little,
And then maybe you'll have it posted on the, Samantha will be able to post it publicly again.
hopefully.
So Pam and Dave, we'll see if we can get a press thing out and that will stimulate intense interest.
All kinds of activity. Okay, enough of that topic. Thank you, everybody. And again, Mandy, sorry to cut the hazardous waste conversation short. Dave, thank you for working with Rob to put that information together, though, for looking forward, because that is something we need to do. There are no minutes available. Mandy, you have your hand up, sorry.
My hand is about minutes. Can we get a list of all the outstanding minutes for this council term that have not been passed?
Well, that would be most of them.
Yeah,
How
it would
about
be-
how about we list the ones that we have reviewed, which is about 3.
Well, I think we need a list of those that haven't, so it might require just basically saying, here have been all of our meetings. And which ones don't have minutes or which ones
Okay,
have
yep.
minutes. Thanks.
I
And-
can try to put that together. Yeah.
And
Kathy.
here's a thought, but it's not like we're adhering to it in finance. Mandy, I don't even know whether there are any minutes that have been taken for 2025. So that it's not like we haven't reviewed them, but I don't know whether they exist.
2024 too. I'm talking about the whole term.
No, but
2024 and 5, yeah.
But what we did in finance, because of the huge backlog, but again, I'm not sure it's happened, is 2 people took the responsibility to say, I will review them. And to the extent I don't have good notes, I'll look at them against the Zoom and I will make any edits, and that we delegated approval rather than spent time in the committee. And in JCPC, I have taken on the role as chair as the reviewer. And people get to see the minutes. So it was a way of not getting to this backlog. And in JCPC, we have to do it because we have such a short window of meeting and it's useful to people. So I don't know whether that would ever be considered. And it was someone, especially because of the big backlog. And Mandy, it's both Bob and Andy. Bob was going to do 2024 and Andy was going to do 2023. We're talking about a really big backlog because it never made it on for the same thing you're facing here, that the finance committee meetings got to be too intense to look at 8 sets of minutes. And no one was reading them. So that was the other thing, except for 1 or 2 people, no one was reading them.
Well, we don't know who in the town wants to be reading them.
Well, I'm
So
frankly worried that they don't even exist, that there's no
That's what I'm
draft,
saying.
Kathy.
No, so
and
that's what I'm
if there's
saying,
drafts,
Mandy.
no one can review
If
them.
there isn't a draft at all, so on finance, I know we have drafts for the 2 years, even though you don't see them posted. So I'm going to see whether Athena just posts the drafts for finance and then find out whether we also have drafts. I just haven't seen drafts other than the very first finance meeting where we elected officers. That was an easy one. And
okay, so I will take the responsibility of making a list of all the meeting minutes that we have or have not
okay.
seen. Okay. Next agenda preview, solar bylaw, hazardous materials section. I would also like to go back through design standards because it personally felt like there are a lot of items in the drinking water protection section that actually are really basic, good design standards that apply to any project, not just those within drinking water system. So those are at least the 2 topics that we want to hit, as well as the little red marks. And we'll start to make a really conscious effort to come to a conclusion about something and delete the comment off to the side so we start to clean up our document better.
So
Kathy.
sorry, my hand was up from before, but I'll ask my question. When I looked at one of these, what I'll call marked up drafts, the very beginning, had a couple of choices on how to frame what this bylaw was about. And I had a slight preference for one versus the other, but wanted an edit on both of them because I thought both could be improved. So there's some other parts, it's not what we're requiring, but I think the more we can be clear about what the purpose of the bylaw is. So we had Peter, it was kind of written as Petersham, and so I have read different versions of the way other towns have started it, and I think there's an improvement on them. But Pam, for me, at some
That would be helpful.
no, for me, at some point, starting at the beginning, going through what we've already done and saying what we haven't done would be good. I'm not saying you have to do that next week, but I find it to have parts we, in theory, have looked at, but we didn't make decisions on, that I find that difficult. I feel like we're circling back on things rather than
Okay.
moving forward. So you just
Yep.
suggested going back to design standards, and I thought we'd finish that. So I would like to get to a point where we're
It's
actually.
circular.
No, it's just too much. One thing reminds you of another, because the other thing about this document is if it gets too big, too unwieldy, and has too much detail on it, it also won't be useful for the people who are trying to enforce it, so
Or develop.
to whether it's at the applicant, that we need to be aware of who the recipient is of the bylaw in terms of enacting it. So that's just my
Yep,
observation of a
Okay, so
document.
we'll include that section as well. And but I'm probably going to put first on the agenda ZBA and planning board as 4A instead of 4C. Mandy.
That's fine. I'm just looking to be as efficient as possible with this solar bylaw and
Yep.
getting near
So-
to a final as we move through the pieces of it. Yeah.
We haven't been through every piece even once yet, which is why those beginning pieces still have comments on them, because we did each section, what we've been through, we've only talked about once and then we've moved on. And when we've gotten stuck, we've said, well, here's 3, we'll come back when we get through the whole thing. And so I would prefer that we still get through the whole thing before we circle back to the beginning, so that,
No, that's fine. I'm not asking.
like,
I'm not asking Mandy now to go back to the beginning. I'm just saying that for me, I wouldn't mind and I thought what we were doing was also a good use of Stephanie's time. We had this great memo from them, and we were trying to at least decide where it sliced in, and Stephanie's comments on were inconsistent on what we call something, on heavy rain, light rain, lots of rain,
Yep. I
just
thought
on.
we resolved some of that, but yeah.
But just, I think that's important because the staff spent time thinking about this. So it's just it's for me, let me put it this way, it's very unusual. Mandy, if we'd done the wage justice bylaw this way, I would have dropped out of the group because not making decisions alone, just on trying to make sure we understood what we were doing and then got quicker. So that's my only plea, is if we go through it, I don't mind going through the whole thing and then coming back, but just to be decisive as we're going through it, rather than put more margin notes in on we're coming back to it.
believe it or
Okay.
not, we're actually got a lot less than we have. The ones that remain from what we've gone through have basically been, there's been 2 different visions, and since you can't present your language until you get to the meeting.
Yeah.
It's okay, there's 2 there, we can't do it, let's come back to it when we circle back.
fine.
That's why a
Okay.
lot of it's there. We've been trying to make those decisions as we go through.
Okay, that's just my plea as newcomer, that I can't be very useful if I haven't heard the discussion.
And you're going to fire me as chair because we're 30 minutes over time. And so we're going to do announcements. The next CRC meeting is May 22. And I didn't anticipate anything ahead of the meeting, 48
So,
hours.
Pam, you just said we're 30 minutes over, so what is the official time of
I
this?
thought we were 3 to 5.
Oh my God.
Okay,
I have to
Oh.
tell you, at the beginning, I was thinking 4:32 because we used to start at 4:30 anyway, but no,
Okay,
we go
Oh
to
my
5.
gosh.
no,
I'm
fine,
sorry.
no, fine, because I just updated my calendar and I thought I had it correctly now. Okay, thank you.
I was sitting here being really anxious that we had gone way over our time budget. I'm sorry.
Okay.
No wonder I was so confused when you're like, we gotta finish. I'm like, we got like 40 minutes left.
Should have said something then.
But we
Oh
took
my
up all
God.
the time.
We needed that time.
We did
It's
need the
okay,
time.
it's okay.
So now it's actually 5 o'clock. We
5
could
o'clock?
end on time.
This is how you finish on time. You think you're running behind.
Yeah.
For all of
Sorry
us.
about that, everybody.
No, it's
I
perfect.
would have
Okay.
spent more time on, I wouldn't have been as brusque.
It's okay.
Okay. We're in good order.
Shall I move to adjourn?
Yes.
Second.
But with a caveat that to take extra care to sort of go back and do the editing that you want to edit, get your head around stuff that's coming up in the rest of the document, and then hopefully we can plow through some of these in a more facile manner. Okay, motion to adjourn.
You've
Is
had
there a
it.
voting.
second?
You've already got it. You just have to take the vote.
Counselor Haneke,
Aye.
Jennifer Taub,
Yes.
Kathy Shane,
Yes.
Pam Rooney, yes. Thank you, everybody. Thank you,
Good
Dave.
night,
Yeah.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.